President, it scared me for a minute. I thought we were almost engaging in a debate on the Senate floor. This could get interesting here. I have great respect for both my colleagues that were just making comments, and it'll be an interesting discussion on the floor when they both have their respective numbers, and we'll look forward to that. And I want to say to my colleague from Arizona that what he said is exactly right. Raising taxes is, in the time of tough economic times, is a very, very difficult thing to do and is not stimulative of the economy. The way we need to see revenues increased, and I don't think there's any disagreement from anybody in the Senate or in the House that the 14.5% of GDP that we are now seeing in revenues has got to be increased. But the way we need to increase it is enacting policies, whether it be tax policies or spending policies or otherwise, that will truly grow the economy. And we can do that with the right kind of policies that will not only, in the short term, stimulate the economy and show an increase in revenues, but it will also have the same impact on the other side of the ledger, which is reducing spending. We're now at an all-time high since World War II on the spending side. We're at an all-time low on the revenue side. And that's what's gotten us into this terrible fiscal problem that we have today. And I concur with what the senator from Arizona said. And I look forward to continuing to dialogue with him as well as the senator from Rhode Island about what needs to be done to get this gap closed. Mr. President, I want to rise tonight to discuss the need for the American government to fundamentally change the way it conducts business. Congress and the President can no longer fail to make significant, meaningful changes to our fiscal path. We must act now to ensure the safety and security of our nation. There's a mutual understanding from all involved in the ongoing debate that the current fiscal path our country is on will lead us to ruin. It is simply unthinkable to believe that we can continue to run deficits in excess of $1 trillion on top of $14.3 trillion in accumulated debt and remain the leader of the global economy. It is well known that the federal government will soon risk a potentially catastrophic default on its credit obligations. Clearly, any increase in the debt ceiling must come with substantial policy reforms and commitments that future spending and deficits are being addressed appropriately. Against this backdrop, we are being provided with a unique opportunity to review the underlying causes of our current path and potential effects that we face. Just last week, the Congressional Budget Office released its long-term budget outlook. Their release shows debt increasing to approximately 200% of GDP by 2035, unless drastic and immediate changes are made. Economists have told me that a debt equaling 90% of GDP is the tipping point, and that after that it is impossible to turn the situation around. Under the same CBO scenario, interest costs alone in 2035 would reach 9% of GDP, and 9% of GDP is more than what the United States currently spends on both Social Security and Medicare. This body spends a considerable amount of time deliberating on matters of national security, and indeed, that is extremely important work. We must stay vigilant that any threats to this country are swiftly dealt with. However, Admiral Mike Mullen, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs, has said emphatically over and again that our debt is the single greatest threat to our national security. Admiral Mullen is not alone. The co-chairs of the President's own Fiscal Commission warned him of the need for swift action. Mr. Bowles and Mr. Simpson continue to speak almost daily of the importance of addressing our fiscal situation and continue to make impassioned pleas that this situation must be corrected and must be done so in the short term. It is during these hard times that most Americans look to their elected representatives and the Chief Executive of the United States for guidance on these issues. The American people have waited for leadership on this issue and have demanded fiscal discipline. It is reprehensible that an issue of this magnitude and significance is subject to the partisan bickering and gamesmanship that often rears its head in politics. This is an issue that will determine the fate of our country. It deserves careful, serious, thoughtful deliberation and not political theater. Not long ago, the Senate held a series of votes on budget resolutions that everybody knew were determined to fail. The American people expect and deserve an honest budget debate and an honest budget process. And while I'm glad that the President is now engaging in this debate, he too has not been forthcoming or helping decide America's future budget fate. He has not given those in his party instructions or guidance on how to address our fiscal situation, nor has he given the Congress as a whole a relevant plan. It would be reprehensible for these White House negotiations that are now underway to produce a last-minute proposal that leaves Congress no time to review the merits of the legislation or the immediate and lasting effects to the American people. I've been on record many times before as stating everything must be on the table when it comes to solving our debt problems, and I seriously mean that. We see daily the effects of oppressive debt in countries like Greece and the fear and panic it creates for the citizens of that country. We must take the steps now to ensure we don't fall off the precipice, and that means looking at all of our options. We must reduce discretionary spending, reform entitlements, simplify the individual and corporate code, and lower tax rates. This is a proven path to prosperity because the solution is based on both spending reduction and economic growth. And we have a model for this. And the model is what Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan did in 1986. We saw an economy stimulated at a time when it really needed it by the elimination of tax expenditures and the lowering of tax rates, particularly on the corporate side. It's important on both the personal and corporate. But if we're truly going to expand our tax base and see revenues increase, then we need to make the corporations in this country that manufacture the finest quality of products of anybody in the world on the same level playing field as their competitors across the globe. So it's of critical importance that we reform our tax code, make it simpler and fairer, and particularly from a corporate level, more competitive from a worldwide situation. We must cut federal spending in any way we can. Our current levels of discretionary and mandatory spending simply cannot be sustained. But we can't solve our problems simply by reducing spending. We've got to reform entitlements. We've got to look at those issues that are very, very difficult for a lot of us to deal with. And we've got to make some hard and tough decisions. And the unfortunate part about this is we don't have a lot of time to do it. I don't know what the window is. The window may be 6 months, maybe 12 months, maybe 2 years. No economist will give you an exact, definite prediction of how long this window is. But the one thing we do know, that we were not able to predict the financial crisis that occurred in 2008. But as Mr. Bowles has said time and time again, this is one crisis we can predict. So now is the time for policymakers in Washington to act. It's job creation that will ultimately be the benefit to Americans once a strong and balanced federal budget is in place. Slower economic growth results in dramatic job loss. Christina Romer, the former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors, equated 1 percentage point of GDP with 1 million jobs annually. We cannot allow the American people to suffer by not providing the economic basis for recovery and growth. A balanced federal budget that is free of excessive debt will lead to a healthy economy and long-term sustainable job creation activities. Mr. President, I would yield the floor.